Imagine yourself in a Spanish-speaking country. You want to do some clothing shopping. You walk into the shop and you see something fantastic. Now you want to try it on. How could you ask, where is the fitting room?
By the end of this episode, you'll be able to ask for clothing sizes, talk about how clothing fits you, and survive a shopping trip in Español. Vamos, amigos! Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your experienced Spanish teacher and co-host from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
We'll help you get confident listening and speaking beginner Spanish with content you can actually use in real-life conversations.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on socials at Spanglish_friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos.
Bienvenidos, Spanglish friends, and welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to our global community of Spanish learners. It's great to have you here.
Amigos, bienvenidos a nuestro episodio 60. Welcome to our 60th episode. Wow, 60 episodes of learning Spanish together every week. It's fantastic to have you here.
Yes, and today's episode is all about clothes shopping. La ropa, how to communicate in basic Spanish when you're in a clothing store.
This is super practical, muy práctico este episodio, because whether you are traveling or just living abroad, or you're just maybe curious to learn this vocab, this is the Spanish you'll actually use when clothing shopping.
That's right. And today we're keeping things simple with just 3 things we want you to learn. Primero, firstly, how do you ask when clothes shopping where the fitting room or where the dressing room is? A very important pregunta. Segundo, number 2, how do you ask for different clothing sizes? How do you say, do you have this item of clothing in this size? And tercero, learning number 3, how to say if an item of clothing fits you well or not. How can you then ask the shop assistant for a bigger or a smaller size?
But first, primero que todo, let's have nuestra conversación pequeña, our mini conversation, as always, to test those listening skills.
As always, do not stress if you don't catch every single word we're saying. Just listen to familiar words to prove to yourself your Spanish listening skills are improving.
Exacto. Today, Em is going to do some clothing shopping, and I'm going to be the assistant. I'm going to help her with everything she needs. Entonces, amiga, ¿estás lista?
Lista, profe Val.
Comencemos. Hola, disculpa, ¿puedo ayudarte?
Sí, disculpa, ¿dónde está el probador?
Ah, el probador está al fondo, a la derecha.
Ah, gracias. ¿Y tienes esto en talla mediana?
Ah, sí, aquí tiene.
Ok, gracias, pero no me queda bien. ¿Tienes una talla más grande?
Sí, aquí tienes una talla más grande.
Perfecto, gracias.
All right, amigos, what you just heard was a mini conversation, and there we talked about where the fitting room is. We talked about sizes, and we also talked about if something fits well versus if not.
So let's break all this down so you can start using it too in just 10 minutes. Let's go, Profe Val.
Vamos a comenzar, amigos. First, you walk into the clothing shop and you want to try something on. So maybe you could ask, ¿Dónde está el probador? Let me break this sentence down. ¿Dónde está? Where is el probador? The fitting room. Now, in other places in Spanish-speaking countries, you could also hear el vestidor. So you could either ask, ¿Dónde está el probador? Or ¿Dónde está el vestidor? They both mean the fitting room.
Nice. And if you want to be extra polite when you're asking where this is, you can say disculpa, which is like, excuse me, disculpa, ¿dónde está el probador? Or ¿dónde está el vestidor? So disculpa just means excuse me to start a polite interaction.
Now we can jump to the sizes. Talking about sizes, starting with the word size, in Spanish is talla. La talla is a feminine word. And to the plural form, saying sizes, we could say las tallas.
Okay, so let's talk about common sizes you might want to ask for at the shop. When we're talking about size small, that's pequeña. Medium, mediana. I use that in our little conversation. Talla mediana. Grande means large. And you can also go beyond these sizes to say extra large or extra small by adding these words. So you could say talla extra pequeña. Extra pequeña is muy Spanglish, but it means extra small. You can also say talla extra grande, which means extra large. Very Spanglish.
Let's make some sentences you can use to ask for your specific size. So you could say, once you have the item, you could ask, ¿Tiene esto en talla plus your size? This means, do you have this, esto, in the size? And then you say it. For example, ¿Tiene esto en talla mediana? Do you have this in medium size? Or en talla pequeña, in small size? Or talla grande, large size?
Nice. So you can always swap out the sizes. Tienes esto en plus the talla, plus the side. Or when you say sizes, en tallas plus the item.
And adding something extra. If you want to point at that thing, you don't have it on your hands, and you want to point at that, you could say, ¿Tiene eso en talla plus the size? This means, do you have that in this size? ¿Tiene eso en talla mediana? We explain better the difference between this and that in episode 49. If you haven't listened already, I would highly recommend you to go and check it.
100%, 100%, Profe Val. That is such a useful episode. Now, we know about clothing sizes. We know how to ask for the change room. Let's pretend now we're trying on clothes, and the big question is, does it fit?
How could you say this?
So, if an item of clothing fits you well, and you're talking to the shop assistant, el asistente, you can say, me queda bien. Me queda bien. It means it fits me well.
On the other hand, if it doesn't, you could say, no me queda bien. No me queda bien. It doesn't fit me well. And if you want to ask for another size, the size that might fit you better, you could say, ¿Tienes una talla más pequeña? Do you have a smaller size? Or ¿Tienes una talla más grande? Do you have a bigger size?
Yes, very practical. You can mix these two sentences together to describe how it fits you and grab another size if needed. For example, no me queda bien. ¿Tienes una talla más pequeña o más grande?
It doesn't fit me well. Do you have a smaller size or bigger size?
Nice. And this is exactly how you'd say it in real life. And I've used this definitely when traveling in Spanish speaking countries in El Probador, making sure you fit the clothing correctly.
Genial, amigos. Entonces, it's time to have a recap. Okay, so everything cements in our minds. Grab a pen, a piece of paper, and write all of this down. Entonces, first, we learned aprendizaje número uno, how to ask where the fitting room is using ¿Dónde está el probador? Or ¿Dónde está el vestidor? Where is the fitting room? Second, aprendizaje número dos. You learned how to ask for your specific size, saying ¿Tienes esto en talla plus the size? Do you have this in talla pequeña, size small, talla mediana, size medium, talla grande, size large? And third, aprendizaje número tres. You learned how to say if something fits you well versus if it doesn't, saying me queda bien, it fits me well. Or no me queda bien, and asking for bigger or smaller size. ¿Tienes una talla más grande? ¿Tienes una talla más pequeña?
Love it. That's absolutamente everything you need to start going clothing shopping in Espanol as a beginner. Woohoo!
Amigos, maravilloso! Genial! And if this recap wasn't enough practice, don't worry because every week we give you a reto de la semana, our challenge. So you can practice with small activities, everything we've learned together today. Now, head to the comments and imagine again, you walk into a shop and you want to try something on. You tried, awesome. However, it doesn't fit you well and you'd like to ask for another size. How could you do it in Spanish? Tell us. Em and I, we would love to read your comments.
Yes. And speaking of awesome, before we head, a huge shout out to our Spanglish friend of the week, which goes to Jess, who commented on Spotify. And she was listening to our episode, What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say in Spanish, instead of just saying, sí, sí. And she said this episode was so helpful and with all the little expressions. And she said, y'all have a new listener here. Love it.
Maravilloso, yes, amiga, bienvenida a la comunidad. Welcome to the Spanglish Friends community. Spoiler alert for next week's episode es nuestro episodio 61, and there we'll be diving how to express when you are not feeling well, when you're feeling sick, when you have a cold, when you have a flu. How can you express this in Spanish as a beginner?
This is going to be super duper handy for anyone traveling to Spanish speaking countries because at some point you will inevitably become sick. So it's great to be able to communicate what you're experiencing and your needs in Espanol. Have a great rest of your week.
Ciao, amigos. Thanks for listening to Spanglish Friends. We're both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us, leave a rating, or tell a friend about the show. It helps our awesome community grow.
Join fellow beginner Spanish learners by following us on Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_friends.
Congratulations on taking another step in your Spanish learning journey.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.